So the first thing I want to say is that there are some limits to this video lesson, things I will not really be able to do for you. First of all, the prompt you have is a broad prompt. Actual AP exam prompts are often, or most often, very broad, and you have to do the work of narrowing down the prompt. So part of your assignment is to see whether you can come up with a thesis in response to a broad prompt. So I've divided the prompt up into two sections, a red and a green one. We're going to talk about the green one only in this video. The red is all background information. I'm not even going to discuss it right now. The green part of the prompt is the instruction. So it says, analyze Sophocles' use of dramatic irony in Oedipus the King and discuss how this literary device shapes the structure and meaning of the work as a whole. So let's take a closer look at that. So analyze Sophocles' use and so forth. Analyze is a reading task. It doesn't mean it has nothing to do with the writing, but you begin it before you write. You'll probably change or do some more analysis as you keep going, because writing is a way of understanding what you think. But it's basically a reading task. Discuss is a writing task. So the word discuss indicates that this is less focused than a persuasive essay. It is not asking you to convince people and to choose only the evidence that supports you and to refute arguments. It's more relaxed than that, but it's also not description. It's not just saying a bunch of things without any meaning attaching them. It's a single idea that you are trying to explore and you're trying to give other people insight into. So by this point, you already would understand what dramatic irony is and why we use textual evidence. And so I'm going to ignore those in this video lesson. All right. Although discuss comes after analyze, in order to make this process work and make it efficient, we're going to first talk about the writing task, because we need to know what we are trying to analyze. We need to know what we are going to write in a general way before we can do the reading preparation for that. So examine the writing task. Let's look at it. Discuss how. Now I've replaced this literary device with dramatic irony, and the only reason it wasn't repeated in there is I didn't want to repeat it, or in the AP prompt they didn't want to repeat too much, but it's the same thing. Discuss how dramatic irony shapes the structure and meaning of the work as a whole. So in this video, we're going to go through all the parts of this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to notice that your essay is probably going to start with a slight rephrasing of this instruction. So for example, dramatic irony shapes the structure and meaning of Oedipus the King because or by, and you're going to finish that. I'll give you a slight example towards the end of the video. So this is, if you start this way, it's going to produce an awkward sentence that doesn't matter. There's no deduction or anything for that. It's clarity. As you mature as a writer, you may want to be more creative in the way you express yourself while still staying on topic. So now we're going to make a transition to the reading task. So you've understood the writing task, and what it means is you need two things. You need an idea about the meaning of the work, and you need textual evidence. So remember, the writing task is discuss how dramatic irony shapes the structure and meaning. You need to understand, you need to have an idea about that. And then you need your evidence. So the reading prompt is the word analyze, the reading task. And it's asking you to look closely at the text, and specifically to look closely at examples of dramatic irony. So find specific passages in the text that you want to discuss. Now, that doesn't mean you find random passages of dramatic irony. It means you find several passages that connect to each other. So here's another transition now. We're going to go back to the writing task now that we've explored the preparation, right? We looked at the writing task so we could do the reading task. Then we did the reading task. Now we're actually engaging in the writing. So when you look at the examples of dramatic irony that you find in the play, you're thinking, is this one that shapes the structure and meaning of the work? So we really need to look a little more closely at structure and meaning. And now you have to be focused on deciding what you want to say. How, and this is probably the most important single sentence or part sentence in this whole presentation, how is the reader or the viewer's opinion of Oedipus affected by the fact that he does not know what he did? This, when I use reader or viewer, I bring up an issue that always comes up, and so I just thought I'd address it here. And the issue is that you probably shouldn't use I. I'm not banning I, there's no deduction for it, but I is an extremely weak point of view. It's like you're apologizing for saying what you think. We don't need to know that you said it. You wrote it, you said it. So adding the fact that it's your opinion or I think or I did this or so on and so forth simply weakens your argument. Just say what you mean. All right, so now let's talk about structure and then we'll talk about meaning. So structure and meaning are code words. They're very common. They refer to specific expectations for what literature, what writers do and what readers do. Structure means patterns or large parts of a work of literature. So in discussing structure, and we saw this when we looked at poems, especially think of Backwards by Warsan Sher, that the poem goes, all the lines go in one direction and then it's sort of V-shaped, it comes up in the other direction. They're reversed. So that's a large scale feature of the poem. In discussing structure, in this play, you might focus on one scene, or that's a part. You might focus on something that happens over and over, that's a pattern. You might focus on a relationship, that's a part, even though it's spread out. You might focus on two or more related moments of the work, that's a pattern. You might, compare how they turn out differently or something based on whether Oedipus knows or doesn't know. The whole work is too big. Even though the prompt says the work as a whole, that doesn't mean discuss every part of the work. That means discuss the big picture. And a line is too small. Even a group of lines is too small. It isn't a part of the structure necessarily. Only if you can define it as a chunk with its own significance and its own sort of place in the work can you call it a structural piece. So now we'll talk about meaning. So that was structure. Now meaning refers to ideas or messages that the work contains, which apply not just to people in this play, but to the world we live in. So these are not necessarily statements that are made directly in the play. These are what you can conclude or infer by looking at what happens to people. So in discussing meaning in Oedipus, you could use evidence from the play to support your answer to one of the four essential questions in this unit. And so those are on the unit plan. In other words, the fact that Oedipus doesn't know, you could say, sends the message that, for example, you should tell people the truth about themselves. I am not recommending this as your thesis. It is not a good thesis. I chose a not great thesis because I didn't want to take any of the good ones away from people. But it's a working idea, right? I could write this essay, right? That somehow this play sends the message that you should tell people the truth about themselves. And we can see that from specific places where Oedipus doesn't know. In other words, where there's dramatic irony. And that those have consequences. So then you would need that evidence, right? And the evidence should be on point. So to recapitulate here, understand the writing task in the prompt first, before you start preparing. What are you being asked to write? And here you're being asked to focus on developing an idea about how dramatic irony is important in the way events unfold, structure, and in their meaning. Now that you've understood that that's what you're being asked to do, you don't have an answer yet. Now you go to the reading task and you find the structural sections of the text you want to write about and gather specific lines that you want to cite or discuss in your essay. You know the play at this point, so you're finding stuff that you've already read, and this is an opportunity to reread it, but also an opportunity to go back and discover things you didn't find before. All right, so you've understood the writing task. That's helped you do the reading task. You've gone and you've started to collect your evidence, and think you're finding the place you want to talk about, and now you really need to decide on your idea and craft your first sentence. It may be more than one sentence. Your thesis sentence statement may need several sentences, some supporting sentences, to make your idea crystal clear. So once you've got your idea crystal clear in your mind, line up the passages you are going to discuss and work through them to create your essay. Finally, please proofread for clarity and for standard English conventions. I hope this has been helpful, and good luck in writing your essay.